Now, environmental labels are very similar. Like I said, they're basically just a voluntary version of environmental laws. And most companies use them as a form of marketing, basically, because it does take time and money to go through these certification processes, and so there has to be some incentive for that. And usually the incentive is being able to put some label on your product to say that you've passed this threshold. And the FTC has certain guidelines for what can be claimed, what counts as biodegradable and what counts as recyclable, things like that. But I would say that going beyond that, you have to think about whether the thing that you're saying is honest and whether it's meaningful. So something can be true but not meaningful, like there are candies out there that say that they're fat-free, even though they're full of sugar. And so while it is true that they're fat-free, it's not a meaningful statement because eating that much sugar is still going to make you fat. And so I think that it's important to have measurable claims that tests the honesty of the claim, but then it's even more important to choose those measurements well so that you're measuring meaningful things. So for instance, recyclable is a measurable claim, but it's not very meaningful because almost all plastics can be recycled under the right conditions. It doesn't mean that they are. Whereas a more meaningful thing to measure would be made from recycled content. So that, again, both things are measurable, but one is much more meaningful than the other. And another issue of marketing claims is whether they're self-made claims versus third-party certifications. Usually third-party certifications are seen as more credible because they're by some nonprofit organization. So there are tons of eco-labels out there. There's literally 400 or 500 out there in the world right now. And nobody really knows all of them, particularly not your customers who are wandering around the shelves in the store. Most ordinary people don't even know most of the ones shown here. These are some of the most common yes-no certifications. Again, just like laws, some labels are thresholds where if you reach a certain number of qualifications, then you get the seal. And it doesn't measure whether you're better than that, it just measures that you've met this base threshold. And some of these are from Europe and Asia and the US. These tend to be prescriptive, like in the upper right there's the Reduction of Hazardous Substances Compliance, but some of them are performance-based. For instance, Energy Star is an efficiency standard, and so it measures how much electricity you use. It doesn't care what components you use or what software systems you use to accomplish that. Then there are graded certifications. This one is one that was put forth by Scientific Certification Systems 15 years ago. It never gained traction, but it's potentially very valuable. It's a life cycle assessment-based label that obviously shows a bar graph of how good or bad the product is in a whole slew of different impact categories. This is another graded certification that's gained a bit more traction in the last few years. It's the Good Guide, which you can get as an iPhone app, and they also have a website that gives you number recommendations on different products. And again, it has different categories. It's not quite LCA based, but it is at least in some way inspired by that. The three most famous graded certifications are the ones here. On the right is the LEED rating system for buildings, which has been so influential that it's really changed the building industry. And in fact, now some of its qualifications, its points and requirements are being written into building codes. The U.S. federal standard ASHRAE 189.1 is an emerging standard which is not required yet, but which certain government agencies are using as a required minimum legal building code. Here are the three most famous graded certifications. The two that we're going to use in class are on the left is Cradle to Cradle, and then EPEAT in the middle for electronics. We'll talk about more of these in Here are the three most famous graded certifications. The two on the left and the middle are Cradle to Cradle and EPEAT. We'll talk more about those in a second. And the one on the right is the LEED rating system for buildings. And this system is so influential, so famous, that it has literally changed the building industry. And it's starting to cross the line between a label and a law, because there are green building standards. There's the U.S. federal standard ASHRAE 189.1 is a fairly new standard, which many government organizations, such as the U.S. Army, for instance, so if you want to make a building for the U.S. Army, you have to pass ASHRAE 189.1 standards, which are a version of the LEED rating criteria. Now, EPEAT is a certification system for electronics. It was originally for computers. It's now starting to branch out into other electronics like monitors and other things. And its goal is basically to be the LEED rating system of electronics. And it has a bunch of different categories, which you can see here, and you get a certain number of required points in each category and then optional points in each category, so that you can pass a minimum threshold and then be better or worse so that you can get higher levels of certification. Then Cradle to Cradle is a very materials-oriented certification system. It requires a very, very precise degree of information about the materials used, so much though, in fact, that it's not really practical for use with electronic materials. It's more appropriate for things like furniture or apparel or things like that. But again, it has its different categories, and you have certain requirements and certain optional points in each category, so that you can both get certified and have better and worse scores.